Hello everybody and welcome to my Hidden Gems video for the Steam Summer Sale of 2018. I've already done a general recommendation video that I'll put a link to in the description and in the comments, of which I kind of go into, just a general recommendation of different games that I think you should be picking up, but this is my Hidden Gems video. This video goes over games that you probably may have never heard of, or maybe you have and you just never ended up picking them up, but they're all excellent games. In fact, let's define what I mean by hidden gems before the video gets started, so that way there's no arguing about it in the comments below. I believe a hidden gem is a game that is either not well known, as in like nobody really heard about it, or a game that is even massively overlooked, as in you probably heard about it but you skipped it, which means that you never ended up playing it. And that means there's these games out there that I think are massively underplayed and underrated, even though they are excellent games. Alternatively, it could also just be a game that you have forgotten about, a game that came out a while ago and is also excellent and stands the test of time, but is something that you forgot about because, new games keep coming out every freaking single week, and it's easy to forget about games that you wanted to play and then just, never got the chance to. So what may be a hidden gem to me may not be a hidden gem to you or other people, and just know that just because you know about a game or you think that a game is like massively popular doesn't mean that the game is actually that way or that anybody else knows about the game. As long as we have that understanding, we can get started with what I think are the hidden gems in the 2018 summer sale. First up, you have the Turing Test, which is a phenomenal puzzle game. It is kind of like Portal in a sense. If you liked the Portal games, then you probably will like this. The voice acting is excellent across the board, but it has to do with the Turing Test, which is kind of the test to determine whether or not an AI is like lifelike or has intelligence and stuff like that. So that's like very layman's terms what it is, and it is just so good. The end of the game is fantastic, and it may surprise you in some ways, but in other ways it's just a really good puzzler that looks pretty. I would highly suggest it. But if you're looking for something a little more lighthearted and possibly multiplayer, I would suggest BattleBlock Theater. This is a really funny puzzle platforming game that I would suggest playing with a friend. It does have 4-player multiplayer, but that's only in like an arena mode. The co-op mode is 2-player, so if you want to do that, I would suggest playing with somebody. It makes the game a lot better, a lot more funny, and the game is already really funny, so I would suggest trying to bring someone along. It's cheap enough that you could buy it for a friend if they're interested in it at the very least, but it is just it's a good game across the board. It is a game that came out, like on Xbox Live and stuff like that. So people who have owned a console probably have heard about this game, but once it came to PC, I feel like not enough people picked it up. And it is just such a quality game that it deserves to be played through. And while it's older, it came out like 4 years ago, it still is a game that I think holds up compared to, new platformers and stuff coming out nowadays. And speaking of platformers, if you haven't played Ori and the Blind Forest, go pick up the definitive edition. It is really, really good. It's got an excellent art style, a great soundtrack, and it's just a good platformer. It's a fun game to like sit down and play, and you can't say that about all games, but this game plays really, really well. The thing is, it also has a sequel coming out, which is Ori and the Will of the Wisps, so this is kind of the perfect time to jump into this game. I don't think that this is a massively overlooked game, but it is a gem of a game that if you haven't played, it's almost feeling more and more as time goes on like it's a required game. It's kind of like Mario. Everybody's played Mario. I think Ori is not to that extent, but it is on that same page. You got to play Ori. It's a game that is going to define a lot of platformers in the future because of what it's done, and it's phenomenal because of it. You got to play it. But maybe you're looking for a little bit more of a difficult platforming game, then Hollow Knight is the perfect fit for that. You've got things like Super Meat Boy and those kind of games, but this is a little different. This is more of a Metroidvania style game, as in you're working your way through, you're kind of getting different stuff, and then you're working your way back to different places that you couldn't go before. It's got like a massive world that you're kind of going through and exploring, and it's hard to describe without actually kind of seeing the gameplay, but it is a difficult game. It's not necessarily a game that is going to be nice and relaxing like Ori, but it is really good across the board. It is just a solid game that plays really well and will have you sinking a lot of time into it. I would suggest it. It is different than Ori, so again, remember that this is a difficult game compared to the kind of relaxing game that Ori is, and it will take you some time to get through some levels. You may get frustrated, is what I'm trying to say. But maybe platformers aren't your thing. In that case, Heroes of Hammerwatch is just an excellent game. The original Hammerwatch games, which are similar, are on sale for a lot cheaper. I do really like those games. I think they are really, really good. It's got like a roguelite thing going on with it, where if you die, you can have to start over, but it is multiplayer, so you can play, 4-player multiplayer on Hammerwatch, and then, or it might be 3-player co-op on Hammerwatch, and then Heroes of Hammerwatch is just an improved game on the first, in my opinion. It kind of expands upon the idea, but it is generally the same game. So if you don't like Hammerwatch, you probably won't like Heroes of Hammerwatch. But this is one of those games that I feel is really, really good and nobody is talking about. Pick it up. It's fantastic. If you don't want to take a chance on, a $10 game, go pick up the original Hammerwatch, and if you like that, then you can pick this one up. And if you're into the roguelike style of gameplay, and maybe you do want a platformer kind of like Hollow Knight, then Dead Cells is just the perfect fit for that. It is early access, I have to warn you on that. They're still developing the game, but that doesn't mean that the game doesn't have a lot of content. They're updating it constantly. The amount of content in there is actually staggering now. When it first launched, you're like, okay, you can finish this game in several hours, but now it is pretty meaty. There's a lot going on with it, and it is worth the price tag, even though it is in early access. Plus, and I don't like suggesting early access games, but in this case, because they are updating it so frequently, you kind of always have something to come back to once you've beaten the game, and that is a really nice feeling to have for a game that is in early access, because a lot of early access games get stuck there. This one is not. It is pushing forward, and it is doing so beautifully. It's a great game, plays really well. It's kind of difficult, but it should be something that people who like Hollow Knight and games like that will really, really enjoy. Moving on, though, many of you know that I am a huge Diablo player. In fact, I'm currently the Diablo fans community manager, and I love action RPGs like that. The top-down view is really fun. I've grown up playing Diablo for most of my life, and those kind of games are something that really interests me. And with that, I want to suggest Van Helsing. The Van Helsing games are, I think, massively underrated. They are unique and really cool with a lot of their mechanics, many of them not necessarily super polished, and the game has plenty of its own issues, but all three of the Van Helsing games, in my opinion, are fantastic. I think that, again, they're massively overlooked, but if you like Diablo-style games, like the action RPG, top-down, get loot and move on with your life games, Van Helsing does a great job of it. Alternatively, at the same time, if you ever missed it, Torchlight 2 is also on a massive discount, and Torchlight 2 is just a fantastic game. There are tons of mods on the Steam Workshop for it. You can pretty much modify your game however you like, but the vanilla game, the base game, is just good across the board. You could go back and play the first Torchlight. It is a little dated now. It is still good, but it is dated, whereas I think Torchlight 2 is just a massively improved version of Torchlight. And again, if you're into the Diablo-style games, this kind of makes it feel a lot more like Diablo 2 than it does, say Diablo 3. It kind of goes back to the roots of the franchise more so than pushing it forward in any general direction. There are some unique differences, though, in Torchlight compared to some of these other games. Like you have this pet, for example, that can go back to town and sell things for you, and that's really nice. I like having a little pet follow me around. It is multiplayer. You can pick up some friends and play it. It is awesome. It is really good, and I would suggest it. Next up, I would suggest Bayonetta. This is a game that probably a lot of people missed out on. It didn't necessarily release on the best of consoles when it did come out. Not a lot of people got a chance to go and play it. And then when it finally released on PC, people looked at it and go, this is an older title. I probably should skip over this unless you kind of really heard about it. I don't necessarily think this is an unheard of game. I think people know what Bayonetta is, but if you haven't played it, you really, really, really should. Platinum Games is just a developer that does an excellent job of making action RPGs, and this game takes an action RPG and just puts it at 11. The main protagonist, she is over the top and does so in a commanding way, and the rest of the game is ridiculous, but that is the fun of it. It is a ridiculous game that is gonna make you like yell out loud, like what is even going on? But you're gonna have a fun time doing it the entire game. It is phenomenal. It plays really, really, really well, and from start to finish, you should enjoy your experience. For this price, I would heavily suggest this game, especially on PC, because it is now running at 60 FPS and in HD, which is better than what it was on, the Wii and the Wii U. Let's ignore those versions of those games, because this is definitely the definitive version of it. But maybe you're looking for something with a bit more graphical fidelity. In that case, I cannot suggest Alien Isolation enough. This game is crazy pretty. And for the fact that it came out 4 years ago, it still looks like one of the most gorgeous games. And I can say for a fact, because I've played through from start to finish, it is still one of the most gorgeous games I've ever played. I think some people may skip this because it is a quote-unquote a scary game, but at the same time, I think it needs to be played. It is so unique in the genre that I feel like I don't understand why more people aren't trying to replicate what it did, and I don't understand why there hasn't been an announcement for a sequel yet, because this game was just so good. And if you're a fan of the Alien franchise, this is like the definitive version of what Alien is. You go and you watch a movie like Alien Covenant, which was awful, and then you compare it to a game like this, and you're like, why didn't they just like take this game and make it into a movie? Because that would have been way better. The thing with this is, while it is a bit older, and if you skipped over it, you need to understand kind of what is happening in the game, which is that the alien is there, but the alien isn't just some like AI thing that is, just randomly and programmed to stalk in like a very specific way. No, this is like a thing that learns, and it learns how you hide and how you play, and it will get better at stalking you. And if that sounds terrifying, it kind of is, because it gets into a point where you don't feel like you're playing against like a level that somebody made. You feel like you're playing against an entity, and this entity is hunting you down and is doing so in a phenomenal way. So it does put on a lot of pressure, and it does make the experience a little bit more terrifying than you would otherwise have in one of these kind of games. However, there is a caveat to that. Sometimes it's a little obtrusive and Alien sticks around far too long, and you find yourself just sitting in a locker just waiting for it to disappear because you're like, this thing just won't go away. It's kind of annoying sometimes, but at the same time, the good far outweighs the bad. If you want to watch, someone play through this game, we have a full playthrough. I'll put a link to it in the description and in the comments. It is a bit older. Again, it's 4 years ago, but this game was just so good. I loved the heck out of this game. You need to play it. Next up, I would suggest the Don't Starve games. That includes Don't Starve Together, by the way. So Don't Starve is a single-player experience. It's a survival game. It's got kind of a Tim Burton art style to it. It's got amazing art direction and sound direction, music and everything. It's perfect. It's a great game. And if you haven't played Don't Starve, you really, really should if you're even remotely interested in survival games. But they also have Don't Starve Together, which is multiplayer and is phenomenal. It is also discounted, and they just came out with a new content update for it, which is fantastic. I would suggest playing this game. I think a lot of people may have skipped over it because, for one reason or another, they just maybe weren't into survival games or not. But this is just a good game overall, and it will allow you to put a lot of time into it. So you're getting a good bang for your buck with the Don't Starve games. The pack is massively discounted, and I would suggest picking that up if you're even remotely into Don't Starve. If you are into that survival genre, though, The Long Dark is fantastic, and I think a lot of people may have slept on this game because it came out in a time where there were a lot of survival games coming out. It has a single player mode. It is fully launched, so it was in early access, but now it is completely out. Like I said, it has the single player mode, and as far as for the survival mode, it is getting new content in it, and it's just good. It is really, really good, and for the most part, I think this is one of the most complete survival experiences out there. So if you're into those kind of games, this game is a must play, and it's stupid cheap right now. And I think that's the big kicker is, you may be like, maybe I'm not into the survival games as much as I should be. What's a good starting point? Well, this is a great starting point because of the price and because it is a complete game. Would suggest The Long Dark. It is fantastic. And now for something completely different. Dungeon Defenders 2 is a free-to-play game. You can just go and download it and play it. You don't need to have played the first game. Dungeon Defenders 2 is really good, and any of the little packs that they have that you can pick up, such as like the Jumpstart pack, which is a pretty good jumpstart, is also discounted. So you can download it, play it. If you like it, then you can pick up the discounted packs. What is Dungeon Defenders? It is a RPG tower defense game where you're playing as a specific character that can build defenses, but it's a tower defense, so like enemies are coming down specific like pathways, and you're trying to stop them from getting to your crystal. The original Dungeon Defenders is on sale as well on a massive discount. It has so much content there with the Dungeon Defenders collection that I would suggest picking that up, even if you're not sure if you'll like the game, because all of the DLC for it is really good. There's, there's like some Halloween like packs that just add cosmetics, but then there is one that like adds a full Halloween level that is very good. The Dungeon Defenders is best played with friends, so if you have anybody who has this game or is interested in it, pick it up. But overall, I would suggest playing Dungeon Defenders 2, even though I think Dungeon Defenders, the original game, is the most complete package, just because Dungeon Defenders 2 is more modern, and it is easy to get people to play with because it is free to play. And here's a game you may have skipped over and probably did because you knew nothing about it, or it just seemed weird. Headlander is really weird and really freaking fun, and it's got an awesome aesthetic, and it's set in like this retro 70s area. It's on a space station. The best way you could describe it is you're this little head that floats around, and you land on things, and you can't take over their bodies. It was published by Adult Swim, and it was developed by Double Fine. That should tell you a whole heck of a lot about what this game is. It's funny, and it's weird, but it's really good. Other than that, I can't describe this game to you. You just gotta go play it. It's fun. Next up, maybe you already own and have played Terraria a ton of times, like pretty much everybody has. Well, don't forget about Starbound. Starbound is a Terraria-like game in the fact that, it is a 2D thing that you're like, it's hard to describe. It's got like some survival elements to it. But generally, it's got a lot of building and a lot of like killing of bosses and stuff. Starbound takes that to the next level. You can visit different planets, and different planets have different biomes, and there's like millions of planets that you can explore, and it's multiplayer. It's just a really solid game. If you missed Starbound, it's got a great single player. Well, I say single player. It's got this great story mode that you can play with friends. You can obviously play it in single player as well. It is a complete game. They just got a new update to it recently, and that adds a ton of new content to it. It's fun. It's really cool. And it is, while it is like Terraria, it is unique in its own sense. And I would suggest, grabbing a couple people if you can and playing through it. You also have the Legend of Grimrock games. They're both really good. The only way that you can really describe it is it's like an old school dungeon crawler. So, imagine the dungeon is a grouping of tiles, and you have a party. Your party moves from one tile to another, and each tile is a turn. So every time you move one tile, the enemies move one tile. I played classic games like this on an Atari ST back in the day, and then Legend of Grimrock came out. around and kind of updated that model in a really good way. Your party is set in like a grid of 4 people, and you can kind of move them around as needed, and where they're positioned makes a difference and stuff like that. And you got to keep them alive, and there's puzzles and stuff. Legend of Grimrock, I keep adding an S, and I don't know why. It's a great game, and the second one just improves upon it. The first game is like you're in a prison and you're escaping the prison. Like if you can get to the end of the prison, you're free to go. And Legend of Grimrock 2 is, oh, you've escaped the prison, now you're out in the open world. So it kind of adds a lot more dynamic areas to it. It's just an improved version of the game. Both games are great. The bundle is worth the price. I would suggest this game if you're kind of into a bit slower of an experience where you're having to tactically think about stuff, but in an RPG sense. It's also a beautiful game for what it is, but it is definitely unique, that is for sure. However, maybe you need a bit more color in your life. Go play Oxygen Not Included. This is an early access game, so I can't fully suggest it because it's not completely out, and Clay, while a great developer and a developer that's constantly adding new content to this game, have not released this game yet. So it is not complete, but it is very fleshed out. It is a 2D survival type game. It's like a sim management game because you're managing these little dudes, you're trying to keep them alive. It is not necessarily easy, but it is also pretty fun to try to keep these little dudes alive. And you kind of freak out because you have to actually worry about real chemistry and stuff. There's the oxygen levels in the air versus the carbon levels versus methane gases and stuff like that, and how gases actually work in a physical sense, and how some gases are heavier than other gases. And it's cool, it's unique, but just as a the little parentheses, it's an early access game. So if you're not into early access stuff, don't bother with this. But if you don't mind it that much, this is a rather detailed experience. It's very full, it's got a lot of stuff in it, but they're still working on it. I would suggest it. It is a lot of fun, if not a little hectic. And if you're into management games like that, there's always Prison Architect. Lots of people love this game, even if I think it is a little older, so people keep forgetting about the fact that it exists. And if you never picked it up and you passed over it, now's the perfect time to do it. It's updated plenty of times. There's a lot of mod support for it. It's just really fun. Who doesn't like managing a prison with prisoners and stuff? It's rather relaxing in a weird way. For any time that I've ever sat down and played it for a long period of time, the time just kind of flies, and then all of a sudden you realize oh no, I've had a lovely day of just sitting here managing prisoners and my guards, and oh god, there's a breakout, stuff like that. It is a lot of fun, and it's cool, and it's very unique. And finally, you need to play Pyre. I added the Supergiant collection to my general suggestion list of my previous video, but I really need to emphasize the fact that I think Pyre is massively underrated, and it feels like nobody talked about the game, or the people who were talking about the game were the people who are people like me who talk about games for a living, but it didn't really ever feel like anybody went and picked it up. And I think half of that is because it is a strange game. It is hard to explain, and that is to the detriment of the game. But it is still just a quality game. I mean, it's made from Supergiant, who gave you Bastion and Transistor. Excellent games. It's the same idea here. Pyre is an excellent game. It is just rather unique, and I think far too many people slept on it. So you have this game that has essentially got several different genres married into it. It's a little bit of a story-based text game, like an adventure that you're kind of going through. Almost, if you've seen dating sims, kind of like that, but not quite, because there's a lot more going on to it. And it tells an excellent story through and through, a nice threaded story from start to finish that you can affect in really fun and interesting ways, which is awesome. But on top of that, it has this weird new kind of game underneath it, which is a version of basketball or soccer, anything like that, where you're taking this ball and you're having to get it into the other person's quote unquote goal, which is a pyre. It's a thing of fire, and you're controlling 3 different characters, and the different characters move and behave differently, and you're using these auras that you have to banish the enemies, which are then gone for a certain amount of time, and then you can go and dunk the ball. Or You can use your dudes to like pass the ball back and forth, but the enemy's doing the exact same thing and is banishing you, and it creates a really unique gameplay that you're never going to see anywhere else, because it's just unique, and it's really hard to describe what it is. But it is a truly touching game with a really good story, excellent soundtrack, excellent art, really fun characters that you'll meet along the way. And by the time you get to the end of the game, you'll realize like, oh, my actions had an effect on kind of the outcome. And it is that way. It gives you kind of like a BioWare story like grid at the end, which is like, this character went and did this, and because you did this, this character went and did this. And it's really cool. Do not sleep on this game. For the price, you need to play it. It is a relaxing game. It is going to take you a while. It is a rather long game, but at the same time, it is a game filled with a lot of stories. So if you're ready to immerse yourself in something unique, you need to pick up Pyre. But those are all of my hidden gem suggestions. I think that there are some on that list that maybe will surprise people and have no idea what the heck it is, and there's plenty on that list that are like, oh yeah, I remember that game and I totally missed it. If you manage to get through that entire list and be like, I have and played every single one of those games and I've beat them and they're all fantastic, or I hate them all, then congratulations, you happen to be a better connoisseur of games than most people. But if you got through that list with at least one game that you're like, oh hey, yeah, I remember that, I'm gonna go pick that up, or oh, I've never heard of that, that seems interesting, let's get that, then mission accomplished on my end. I was trying to make it so that there was at least one game on there that you've never played or never heard of, and that will give you some kind of amazing experience, because all of those games are quality from start to finish, and I love them all. With that being said, put your suggestions for games in the comments. You know, if you have your own hidden gems that you think people are sleeping on, you need to put them down there so people can see it. You know, share your games that you think are fantastic that nobody else is really playing or really knows about, because that's the way that we hear about hidden gems. You know, we share them with each other. So share those in the comments below. But outside of that, thank you guys very much for watching, and we shall see you guys next time.